welcome. This is a fun little thing I decided to do for the Heartsong Tarot, which is grab my mom, say hi,
Hi,
and
Bob here.
one to reveal them to her and let her see the wonderful results of my art degree and putting that to good work. But also to get her commentary, having been an eyewitness to the weird mix of things that went into making this deck, and get some of her memories or thoughts about the weird concoction that all came together in illustrating this deck. So, and also she isn't super versed in like esoteric tarot stuff in general, but she's a well-educated woman in the ways of the world and mythology and symbolism in general, and probably some of the myths that a lot of the tarot imagery comes from. So, not not totally unfamiliar, but unfamiliar with the specific tarot jargon. So, is that fair and accurate?
I guess
Yeah.
I'm more here as mother and an elderly layman in tarot to give commentary.
So the first one up is the Fool. And this is the zeroth card in the deck, which is kind of weird concept. It's number zero because it's considered to be the beginning of the cycle and kind of like the bridge, like the beginning and the end, but it's the innocent, foolhardy beginning. So
I love the image of, the rooster proclaiming the dawn, and it's like he's going to guide us through
hmm.
this whole experience.
Okay, so next card is the Magician. So a common theme in the deck is there will be lots of different wizards because there were just a lot in the tarot deck to begin with. Like that's a pretty common theme, and then that kind of vibe with my childhood because in Princess Guinevere and the Jewel Riders, which is kind of a big inspiration for a lot of the content of this deck, there was just this whole like pantheon of wizards, and I like that whole concept. And just the idea that they're everywhere, they're all over the place, all different kinds, different ethics, different prerogatives, and different types. So here my magician compared to the original is a little more like celestial, a little more astronomy oriented.
And more Merlin-esque
Yeah.
in appearance. I
Hmm.
love the orange lilies.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the original's got lilies and roses, and I just kind of hate those together. I don't know. I always hated doing. I worked in the floral industry, so that's where my mixed feels about flowers comes from, and I really tried to overcome that a little with this deck. But yeah, red lilies with or white lilies with red roses was just not my favorite combination, and definitely not my favorite combination of smells. I like the Asiatic lilies a lot more, so I did that swap. But yeah, Merlin. So you like Arthurian lore also, and
Absolutely.
yeah, and you like the books about from Merlin's perspective, the Crystal Caverns and such.
The Crystal Cave, yeah,
Oh.
the Mary Stuart trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
Actually went to Tintagel
Mm-hmm.
when we were in England. Loved that.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know why. I mean,
Because it's
it's just
awesome.
always something I've been attracted to, and I always was much more attracted to Merlin than I was to Arthur
Mm-hmm.
and the whole concept of Camelot, which is why I liked Mary Stuart so much because that was her emphasis as well.
Mm-hmm. Merlin's just cool. He's the master of his domain. He like pays attention and know what's going on. And Arthur's kind of a boring character anyway, because he's just like, I am the chosen one, and those are always kind of boring stories. But Merlin's like, hey, no, there's a lot of moving pieces. There's a lot of stuff going on and powerful entities, and we have to be, careful and respectful. And King Arthur's just like, yeah, whatever, chosen one, don't care. But yeah, I loved Morgan Le Fay and Merlin and just that whole dynamic. And we actually went back and was watching with Josh the uh, Mr. Norrell and Mr. Strange, or I don't remember the title exactly. I'm gonna butcher that, but it's about the restoration of English magic and just like that whole realm of things and kind of the the threshold between like the fairy magic and like the weird kind of other worlds, and that like thin veil of like, Avalon and kind of the more very ancient old fairy characters, and then kind of the more contemporary wizards who are trying to like marry the ancient past with the current needs of the country and such. What was your favorite like is it very descriptive of Tintagel, or like what inspired you besides it just being an available stop that you could make on the trip? So of course, why not? But like what?
Well, I hit the highlights,
Hmm.
um, Stonehenge, and we tried to get into the stones, but of course, we weren't selected for that privilege. You had to apply
You're
months and
not the
months.
chosen one. Mm-mm.
But your dad and I climbed Glastonbury Tor.
Hmm.
We didn't go the easy way. We went the difficult way, and it was quite an adventure. We were hanging on to turf
Hmm.
to make this climb, and your dad doesn't like heights, so that was interesting. Uh,
Hmm.
but it was spectacular. It was just incredible to see this entire, landscape in front of you, and you could feel the power that, that this place resonated. And I've always been attracted to this legend, and so yeah, I wanted to see the things
Hmm.
that I had always read about. So
That's
I
so cool.
I I like your magician.
Oh, thank you. It is he will come up more. There will be other versions that maybe click a little harder with that theme in particular. I like I'm always into like anything astronomy, astrology, and like just spacey. I don't know, I like space. But also in particular like the astrolabes and orreries and things like that. I'm just obsessed with anything with like the moving planets and parts. I don't
Hmm.
know, something about it just really does it for me. And so like the idea of just like knowing the movements of the planets and like knowing your place in the universe. I guess there's something kind of like Carl Sagan about that. And so that's kind of like my version of this magician, who the symbolism here is that he's kind of like he's got one of each of the suits of the tarot, the pentacles, cups, swords, and wands. He's kind of the master of all the elements and can move between them at will to manifest um his desires and his will in the world. And he's got the infinity symbol to symbolize just like the infinite potential of imagination and positive thinking and all that. And the fingers going the opposite way, meaning as above, so below, and all that. So yeah, but mine has a crystal wand because there's going to be crystals in just about everything here. Hmm.
It's all about the crystals.
Hmm. Yeah, this one will be familiar and is basically the only appearance of this, which you may find relieving because if it had been up to probably around 5-year-old me, this would have been everything plastered over. Yeah, it was last unicorn all the time,
Yeah.
24/7. Everything was unicorns. But the symbol of the priestess is like the intuitive, divine feminine in touch with some deeper rhythm in tune with the earth and the cycles and the seasons and stuff. The unicorn obviously that was that for me, I guess. And I did stick, and I know you'll notice this flower, um,
The calla
the
lilies.
calla, yeah, being my namesake. I don't think I was really exposed to the physical calla lilies all that much. We didn't have any, and they didn't really come up much, but I had an awareness, even, pretty young, that that's what that was. And so they were just very like, ooh, alluring and mysterious and special, I guess. Did you like calla lily flowers in particular, or?
No, actually, I picked your name because of the the Greek, basis for it. Um, you were you were tiny and perfect, and so that name just seemed to fit you. And I want I wanted something a little unusual for the time because your last name was so common. So,
Hmm. That's a good trade. I appreciate that you did that. 'Cause, yeah, my last name, very common. I like calla lilies. I like the weird colors a little more. I like the weird orange or the aubergine ones. The white ones are
uh-huh.
kind of like, yeah. But I like the overall silhouette and their use in kind of like the prairie style, like the tiles and the stained glass and things like that. I just like that weird kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
more Art Nouveau than Prairie, but yes,
True.
it's a
Yeah.
very it's a unusual shape and you know, very sinuous in their appearance, and they have something of a, a Jack in the Pulpit
Mm-hmm.
flavor to them, but with these colors and just the substance of the flower itself is not thin and,
Mm-hmm.
lasts for a long time.
Mm-hmm. So the third card, the Empress, a lot of the court cards all have kind of a special rule where the queens are kind of anthropomorphic, and then here I'll wait for Josh, go away. Scoot. Okay. So for the court cards are gonna have a rule that the queens are all typically anthropomorphic kind of monster being kind of things. And so the Empress here is kind of the first iteration of that. And then the kings are all going to be full-blown beasties, because as a kid I was just really into all that. So the Naga is kind of a was one of my favorite monsters in all of the Might and Magic stuff. And Might and Magic was just a really special game for me because that's what me and Dad played. It was kind of like our go-to bonding activity. And I was full blown obsessed with it and like memorized all of the guides and stuff and was like the little lore master. And I'd be sitting in his lap and I'd have the little lore book and, just be bitching him out all the time. Like, no, you're mixing the potions wrong. You did this wrong. You don't know about this thing. You did the quest. And he just put up with it. It was the cutest ever. I was quite bossy. No, but that was, yeah, that was definitely like my fondest bonding memories with dad because I'm not very sporty. We were both kind of mega nerds, so that kind of worked out. I tried
Uh-huh.
to sports to my credit. I attempted. It just really didn't work out. Um, but this character is special in particular also because one thing that you guys did that was super rad is like you just had books. We had so many books and there were just like so many things available. And I had this aspiration when I was a child to know everything. And you guys were like, probably that's fine, go do that.
Mhm.
And I was fully supported in my weird little rabbit holes that I wanted to go down. And dad in particular is kind of interested in Hindu mythology and stuff. So I latched onto that pretty hard, I think,
Mhm.
really. And I love the Naga characters and I just loved the whole flavor of that. So this card's kind of about that. And that as like the feminine Empress ruler character, I think was a good fit because she has kind of this earthy, abundant, mountainous, secure kind of manifestation about her.
Mhm.
And I like the spiky mountain flowers. I think these ones were actually from like the Alps or something completely different mountain, but not the point. I like the kind of flowers and just like the kind of mix of colors that you get is so distinct and different kind of in mountainous regions than the lowlands. So then her counterpart, the Emperor, also in that monstrous video gamey kind of space, is actually the Dragon Shooting Star from Record of Lotus War, which came a little later. That was more middle school. I was obsessed with that show. Anime was just becoming available. I don't know if you remember WYSIWYG or Media Play, and
Mhm.
like the lengths that we had to go to try to collect the
Yes.
DVDs and they're like so expensive and it was just this whole to do and like there you couldn't really get a box set at that time. You had to get them as they were being released like one at a time and it was just this free feverish collection. And it's really funny now because we have streaming and you can just binge watch anything. But back then, you
Oh
would
yeah, it was
want to
a
watch a show. Yeah. I'm sure you remember all the weird programming schedules of all the bizarre shows that I was obsessed with, and you had to record at weird times on like the Disney Channel. What was it? My Little Pony was on at like some weird time.
yeah.
Yep. And you did it. You made sure made sure I had my shows. I appreciate it. But yeah, so this was one of those shows, and then like the Red Dragon in particular being kind of the lording over kingly dragon, I guess. And in D&D, all the colors mean different things, but I didn't have a huge sense of that as a kid. I just kind of the red ones were just like the dragony-ist, the most dragon-ish
Yes.
because they're fiery. Mhm. And the roses in this one actually represent the dragon roses because in the game, and also in the Flight of Dragons movie, which I was full-blown obsessed with,
Mhm.
um, the dragon rose was the way to subdue or like lure them to sleep. So that was kind of like the dichotomy of the Beauty and the Beast thing.
Oh, that's interesting.
Hmm. Also music and different things, but yeah, in the game, that was a whole quest line was like getting the roses. So I always thought that was kind of interesting mythologically, because of course the red dragon is also kind of, I think it's Welsh.
Yeah, there's a red dragon on their flag, I believe.
Hmm. What do you think about dragons? Are you a dragon fan?
Oh, always have been, yeah.
Hmm. That and the gargoyles were what he actually collected, and we had the most kind of iconography of. I love the gargoyles. I feel like they had kind of a more French bent than like British, but
Hmm.
what do the gargoyles mean to you?
I I I just thought that it was wonderful to have something that was I've always been attracted to this mix of the utilitarian with the
Hmm.
fantasy. And, just to know that they were the drain spouts and that they were so fanciful and scary but approachable.
Hmm.
I just love the combination of all of the aspects of them.
Hmm.
So I would go around and take, whenever we were traveling, to try to take pictures of all the different kinds of images of them.
Hmm. Yeah, and I like your collection in particular because you've got them all doing like different things. You got ones that are like reading or in kind of these action poses, like sort of like
The legs
mundane.
crossed is my favorite
Yeah.
one.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is really funny because we hate gnomes. So it's just like there's definitely a line where like that
Oh, I am
becomes like, no, it's not
so,
cute anymore.
so past gnomes. I see them everywhere.
We're very arbitrary in our taste selection, but yeah. No, gnomes not okay. Gargoyles, totally fine. Love the gargoyle.
Totally fine. Yeah.
Equally collectible.
The emperor looks very sedate. He doesn't look powerful in that card.
No, that I think the most healing thing about going back and like comparing all the cards is anytime I'm self-conscious about my art, I go back and I look at the original and it's like, what is even going, like some of the text isn't lined up, like the line quality is just awful. There's just, like all of this stuff is not colored inside the lines at all, and it's just like, dude, whatever I come up with is probably fine. I don't need to feel bad about my art. This original set is the default and people use it. Millions of people use it a day, and it is like not the best art. But yeah, no, he looks a little, I don't know, definitely sedate and possibly, constipated or something along those lines. He doesn't seem in control at all. But the amber
No.
is supposed to be, like sovereignty and like the ability to rule without being like iron fisted and like super rigid and dominant. It's
Uh-huh.
supposed to be a little more, um,
But
you
there's no conveyance of strength in
know, no,
that.
yeah. I don't know that I got that either. I think the dragon is more just like, yeah, don't mess with me.
Yeah, I always told you that I loved you so much that I was always going to tell you absolutely honestly what I thought.
Hmm.
And I know that it broke your heart sometimes. But and again, it's, me looking at the line work and I've seen you over all of these years, and it's just, I'm very, very impressed with all the progress that you have made in developing your craft, and I'm immensely proud of you.
Aw, thank you. I was super self-conscious about this, but I mean, this it's just a raw and vulnerable project anyway, because it's like I, that's the whole point, I guess. But like,
Uh-huh.
at the end, you know how I actually did it? At the end of the day, I decided to try to get the closest to like the effect of the original. I went ahead and got all these brush pens. And so the line art in the cards actually was done in pen and ink first, and then
Uh-huh.
uploaded. And then Josh went and vectorized the lines and cleaned them up to make sure that they would still print boldly and correctly for the holographic,
Hmm.
but they have that hand touched, you know, human, I guess, aspect to them because they were originally done by hand and then digitized. And it was a fun group effort with him because I did the lines and then he colored. So usually I'm the coloring. I was obsessed with coloring when I was a kid. You bought me the cutest little it was like a desk surface and then it had two like cubbies on the side so you could sit on the floor and it would go over your lap and you would sit in color.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, that was like
I
the
remember
best
that.
thing. It's just plastic, but it was like it was really good plastic, you know. It was just like perfect. And I had all my little markers and stuff in the cubbies and yeah, no,
You
you this
didn't
is
have to be at the kitchen table.
if I have improved, it is because of you every step of the way pushing me to actually get good at it. Because like yeah, you didn't pull any punches with the feedback, but nobody else
No.
did either, so
You
yeah.
always had a problem with necks.
Yeah, no. But what I learned looking back at these cards, I used to think I was bad at drawing men and like no, I suck at drawing kids though. Oh my God. This was such a painful project for that reason because like all of the kids just you'll see. It's just a little it's a little bit like
Okay.
but it's my honest best and like you've trained and practiced and this is just I'm confident in what I produce, but I'm not going to pretend I'm like the best at that particular category. That turned out a little weird. But yeah, thank you. Yeah, like the line quality, it was really an interesting challenge with the holographic too, because you want to make sure there's some dynamic
Yeah.
quality to it and it's not just all samey, because it would be very easy just to go in Photoshop and use the whole same line weight for all of it and make it really robotic and clean. But like art is about that weird like line you have to walk where it's like, is it good and clean and quality, but like also not robotic and like it's okay if there's a certain humanity to it, but
Oh,
every step of the way,
absolutely.
you're like white knuckle, like, oh, is it good? Is it right? Is it? I can't be wrong on either front because if it's not human enough, then you get flack in the other direction. I've had a lot of people asking if AI was used for this project, and I have to admit it's not my favorite question because like we use AI for totally other things, but like to have gone and painstakingly hand drawn it and still be getting asked that question is like,
Well,
did I not suck
it's an
hard enough? Should I have
honest
sucked harder for
question
you
to
so you can
ask
tell?
these days, but I know
Yeah.
the lengths that you go to. I just can't wait to see the holographic because I'm just seeing the flat,
Hmm.
imagery on the screen right now.
Yeah, well, it's gonna be the same manufacturer as the journal. I can grab an example in a minute, but yeah, we wanted to really test and see like what that effect was gonna be like. So we did the hardcover journal first, and then we did a lot of testing for durability and like threw it in my purse and like threw it in a book bag to see how scuffed up it would get.
Uh-huh.
We were debating between, partnering with a manufacturer or doing some kind of heat press thing ourselves. But on the whole, like they've been really durable. Everybody's been happy with the quality. So we were confident moving forward because you know how it is these days. Like anybody can just say, like, oh yeah, we do holographic.
Yeah.
It can get scuffed up pretty easy. But this one, you should love this card. This is
Oh,
totally your
you're
bag.
pushing all my buttons here.
Yeah, the Green Man was a very significant uh a fixture in my childhood. Definitely, we have a Rammstein on the front door of a Florentine style green man that is just the best. He's great. But again, with kind of the swapping of the Christian iconography, I always love the line by Frank Lloyd Wright, "I believe in God, only I spell it nature." So
Uh-huh.
like Nature Green Man was very much kind of the bridge between the spiritual realm and the yeah.
Yeah, and you've got the snails and the mushrooms too.
Mhm. Yes. Yep. All the foresty things. How did you like what was your first exposure? Like how did you get into Green Man stuff?
Um, it's just always something that's been attractive to me, and uh, I always was outside.
Hmm.
Yeah. But the woods on our property, that's where we took the ducks to the pond to, for their paddle around, their playtime, and I trees. It's
Hmm.
just, trees have always been much more meaningful for me than flowers or color. It's just the form, the sheltering, the exuberance of them.
Hmm.
So, and then when you pair that with the antlers,
Hmm.
deer were a rare sight when I was a kid. Very, very rare sight. But of course, where we live now, that we've got deer on a daily basis. And they've really become important to me as far as following their lives and getting to know them by observation as individuals. And so when I see the antlers with the trees, that's paradise for me.
Hmm. Yeah, then all the deer are named characters. You've got all all of their, if they get injured or if their entire lineage, you got like it all their whole family tree figured out of the ones
Well,
that.
it's so many generations. We've been here for
Mhm.
25 years, so I've seen them from the time they were born, and
Yeah.
kept up with their lives because they don't travel far from where they're born. So,
Mm-mm. No, and there are some like weird magical deer instances like that I can recall from childhood. There was one point where I was doing the good old trespassing and I was chasing one all the way past Farmer Glass's property.
uh,
There was just it was like something out of a Princess Mononoke movie or something. It was like a deity level deer. It had to be 12 points. It was just massive and it was almost like radiant and glowing or like something out of it was just unreal and it was
uh,
happening because never saw him again, never any evidence of him, but he had just this massive harem. It had to be 15 does or something like that, and it was definitely one of those like down the rabbit hole, following a majestic animal kind of weird moments. But yeah, and even because you've got all of that kind of protected land, not necessarily a sanctuary, but it's somewhat protected where you are. So they can kind of get intense sometimes
hmm
in their size. Well, I'm glad you like my rendition. I like the Green Man. I like the idea of storytelling and the flute and everything kind of being the oral transmission um method rather than the preachy sermon stuff.
hmm
No more organic. I have blurred creatures. Probably not necessary, but hey, why not? They're not well rendered anyway, so it's not like uh yeah, so this was kind of the namesake card of the whole deck. Because this is like the heart song itself is heavily influenced by the Tamara character from Princess Guinevere because like all the lovey heart characters they had in like Captain Planet had like a heart power guy too. And I just couldn't care less like about any like I like those characters, but the whole notion of friendship is magic and all that stuff, not my bag actually. I kind of have come to appreciate that more as an adult, but at the time, like not so much, but yeah, Tamara, I liked so much, I named a hamster after her.
So this was the hamster's namesake?
Yeah, basically. Yeah, Tamara has the Heartstone and she talks to animals.
Okay,
And,
I never realized
and she
that.
plays music like really good and stuff. And music is like Tames the Savage Beast and just has this whole thing. I sucked at music. I still probably suck at it. I'm a little better now, but like, yeah, I was not. I was not same with sports, but like, yeah, I did violin. That was a thing that happened, but I wouldn't say I was very skillful. Did you have well, you were on the opposite side. You were band, right?
Yes, I was in the band until high school, and then it was marching band. I played clarinet, and I quit band because I liked rooting for the football team from the stands more than being on the field during halftime. Plus, they made us do the parades in those horrible, heavy wool
Mm-hmm.
uniforms. Yeah,
A lot of
no.
work.
So
A
that
lot.
lasted until the end of my freshman year, and then I was over it.
Did you enjoy like any of the musical parts of it, or did you?
I I did, but I I transferred my energies and my class schedule from music into more intense art courses, and that's where I really enjoyed. So,
Yeah. Well, I like the concept of music as being this unifying, compassionate force. So I tried to bring that into this card instead of just naked Adam Eve people.
hmm
And I like the idea of the playing together and harmonizing and all that stuff. I have no idea
yeah,
what that's like, but I brought it into the card nonetheless because mostly because of that character and sort of the vibe of it, although I didn't necessarily experience that myself. This one, I don't know if you remember this as much, but maybe. So you had this thing where like the console games you wanted to be like a really social thing for my sister and I, so we would get multiplayer games and it was kind of expected to be a shared experience. The
uh-huh.
only problem was a lot of the multiplayer games of that era were friendship destroying and extremely grueling and competitive, and Mario
Okay.
Kart was one of those. So this is the iconic Rainbow Road map from Mario Kart, which was particularly punishing because if you made one wrong move, you were flying off into space and oblivion, and it was very competitive. So maybe some of the millennials in the audience will feel that whole thing. But the chariot is supposed to be about like self-mastery and control and who's at the wheel kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
I never really understood like the Sphinx bit in the card. There's just a lot going on in this card in the original. I feel like this card was just trying really hard to be really
Yeah.
mysterious and esoteric. And there's just a lot going on.
Yeah, and I've never seen a boxy chariot in my life.
Yeah, no, more like a litter, I guess, or something.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah,
yeah.
it looks like one of those Oriental I don't know, they were carried
Yeah.
four poles,
hmm
by servants.
Yeah, it's got that vibe. It definitely has
Yeah,
a weird Egyptian servant, which
yeah,
which isn't really self-mastery. That's like just kind of having other people do it. Yeah.
yeah.
So I like the go-kart, because that's kind of your first foray into independence as a kid, if you get a hold of some kind of vehicle. I didn't have one of those like Barbie cars or any of those kind of ones,
No.
but pretty soon on, I had access to a golf cart on the farm, and that was like the ultimate liberation. Yeah, I love that a lot. The golf cart was pretty great. Going on the hunting expeditions with the cat. I had a hunting cat companion who was deeply antisocial to everybody else, but if there was violence involved, she would kind of play along. I had a weird it's kind of weird to be so close with taters now because I had a weird relationship with cats growing up for sure. Very mixed.
Yeah.
Had some bad run-ins, but
Yeah, I've never been much of a cat person because of some early childhood experiences, but
Mhm.
I like having taters as a grandson, so
Yeah, he's the best. He redeems the whole species, I think. Okay, so here's the cat one. We'll get back to cats. Um, this one's funny because I wasn't really exposed to He-Man as a kid. I wasn't quite like that old, but a lot of my other contemporaries kind of had that. But this one's kind of inspired by both like Xena and He-Man and like that whole genre of things. Um, yeah, and the strength is supposed to be being able to tame and master the wild beast aspect without overbearing, being able to kind of commune with it and commiserate with it and integrate it and, master in that way. So I kind of went with like a saber-toothy kind of deal, and I'm not sure why the Mongolian steppe climate came in. That just kind of made sense for the warrior woman. I don't know.
Well, you had to be able to use yurt someplace, you know.
Yeah, I love yurts. I don't know that that came up a lot, but I definitely love them. Just that whole aesthetic. Domes and stuff came up more than yurts, but
You were exposed more to the fantasy stuff. Your preschool actually had a very strong policy about what they wanted the students to watch and not to watch.
oh, I didn't know they had a whole. What was their?
I think was it I think it was Power Rangers. When Power Rangers came out, they said they didn't want any of their students watching Power Rangers.
Oh, really? I thought that was just a you rule. See, my mom had this rule about what I was allowed to watch and not watch was it couldn't annoy the ever-loving shit out of her. And I wasn't allowed to watch things like that. Very comprehensive rule. And I thought that was why wasn't allowed to watch Power Rangers. Just
No,
because
no, no,
god
no,
awful.
no.
No, I remember
Preschool
like I
put their
wasn't
foot down and said, "No, we don't like the behavior associated with that, and so we're not going to allow
to
it."
be fair, it sucks a lot. I snuck over to Ashley's house to watch it and it was just like, this sucks. What is this? It's terrible. Yeah, it's not good. I like the a lot of the storytelling stuff and like the Wishbone. I had a pretty wholesome slew of things I pretty willingly watched, I think. Certainly I watched my share of garbage too, but I wasn't like
Yeah, but it was PBS focused.
hmm
Let's put it that way.
No, I watched a lot of and like a lot of the historical stuff because, I was pretty content to watch like what you guys were into as well. And previously that was more both of your tastes was more towards the informative and historical. Certain of you, their taste has perhaps devolved a little bit to the pseudoscience, Bigfoot, ancient alien hunter direction. Originally, it was what was actually on the History Channel, and I think I picked up a lot of that.
Well, they're in our social circle too, and in our family circle, there weren't any other kids your age. So we did nothing to, try to keep you as a, baby or young child. We're just, you've been grown up since, arrival, and we just ran with it.
hmm It probably ended up a little less annoying that way. I know I do in other ways, but at least it wasn't like too much of a like trying to go and like watch like kid shows now. It's just a whole other level of brain rot. I don't know. I'm sure every generation says that, back in my day, but I don't know, man. So Xena, Xena was the inspiration for this. It was in my periphery, even if it wasn't like my main show. So this one's kind of uh I think was inspired a little bit more by Josh also, and he kind of has this character, the spider grandmother, who came up a lot in other decks of ours in research. Um, and just like the crone in general is like a special symbol to me, like I've always related, I guess for that reason, because I was like old when I was a kid or whatever. But I also just really like that elder, calm, collected woman vibe, I guess more. And so like the idea of a storyteller, like the lore keeper, the history weaver. I just love the weaver archetype and like all the myths that go with that. I really like spiders, I get. I mean, I can't say I really like spiders. There's definitely like different categories. I like the weaver spiders. I don't like the roam around and be big enough that you can hear them coming category. I don't like those. Unfortunately, that's most of what we have. But I like the Like when we would go to the zoo and they'd have the orb weavers that were just like out and you could almost run into them. That was so cool.
Hmm.
I'm sure you have a different take on this. I was probably not as good about spiders. I was.
We had one at the bottom of the steps to the basement that you would not allow to be removed. You talked to it every time
Mhm.
you went down there. Um, I can't remember his name, but on this card, I find it interesting the gender switch because
Hmm.
when you think of a hermit, I don't know, I automatically go male, but I appreciate the fact that your figure is female because females are almost never isolated alone.
Hmm.
There you think of females more as being caretakers and being with people. And I like the idea of the female on her own.
Hmm. I think it also stems from just in my life, like the females tend to really outlive the men, so they have kind of this whole latter period in life that is their cronehood a little bit more
That's true.
than I don't really have the basis of comparison of like the elder coot male, um, mostly like in the outer periphery of family, but not too much of that energy. I don't know
No,
that Grandpa would qualify. I mean, he was crotchety, but I don't know that he falls under that kind of like hermity, coot, wizard. No.
no,
No,
no.
he's
But you're right. You didn't have any more elderly male figures in
yeah.
you.
I think I just kind of default, yeah, to the sagey kind of being the woman. And like so much of my research into like the early hominids and hunter-gatherers and all of that kind of history, like the crone has just been a really interesting character in exploring like what is the role of the elder in human history and like what is, why do we have menopause? Why do we have this whole other phase of life? you know, when if you just go by some kind of like super cutthroat biology Darwinian thing, it's like, well, why would we spend our resources to sustain elderly people? It's like all these reasons, there's all this knowledge and all of this stuff and all of these things that are distinctly human that are happening kind of at the tail end of life. So I guess I just relate to that or I think about that too much. I think even when I was a kid, I thought about like death and mortality and all that way too much. I don't know if that's normal, but old ladies are cool. They know a lot of good stuff. I definitely like I was very close to grandma. Of course, I didn't get to meet your parents. So
No.
there's just like that whole half that's kind of missing, but okay, so this one is a whole mood. There's a lot of deep child lore in this one. So let it wash over you. Okay. This is another one of those that I feel like they tried way too hard with the original. That's just like way too esoteric. It's got sphinxes and everything again. I
Uh-huh.
put way too much thought about it, and I thought about the child toy archetypes, right? Because these are supposed to be elemental in the corners of the original. So I thought about like, okay, what are the elements of kids' toys? And it's like obviously there's the masculine and feminine, right? You got your girl and boy toy archetypes. So I thought there's like the soldier, G.I. Joe kind of
The
archetype.
Green Army Man, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. You got your Barbie archetype, obviously. Um, and then dinosaurs, and then kind of collectible animals, which would be My Little Ponies, Pokemon, things like that. But obviously, for copyright reasons, we're not putting a Pokemon on here. I'm not going to risk it. They'll crucify people. That's one you don't mess with, right? But My Little Pony's probably fine. So I think, okay, so we've got our four corners, and there's this epic war going on, right, against the evil Spider Ring. You know this because you were the most epic room mom of all time and you put together goodie bags and did all that. You had a subscription to Martha Stewart Living and you were not afraid to use it. You made some of the coolest stuff. But you know that when you're at the arcade or when you're doing goodie bags, the worst thing, the single worst time is a stupid spider ring because it's like, why is it a spider? Why is it a ring? They just get stuck on stuff. What are you gonna you do wear it? What is it even for? Who came up with this? Spider ring's the worst. That's like the dummy prize, right?
Okay.
Me man is bravely fighting off the spider ring as the others kind of watch pensively, right? And the Wheel of Fortune is all about luck and fate and, fate of the draw. So here, just for like ease of illustration, I did it as kind of like a gotcha machine. Um, Even though we didn't have that as much during that time, that's kind of a newer thing. I mean, we had gumball machines and stuff, but the prize capsule's a little newer. But
Yeah.
you have a fun story about your the expert um claw machine. I was gonna do a claw machine originally. The Grandmaster claw machine operator who would send me stuff.
Yeah, your Uncle Bob, your great Uncle Bob. Um, he was my uncle, my godfather. He lost his arm in World War II in Europe, and he was his truck driver, and he was as skilled with his artificial limb, his hook, driving a truck and doing everything in his life. He could shoot pool, he could do everything. The only thing he couldn't do is cut his own steak
Mhm.
and assistance with that. But he loved going to the horse races and high and stuff like that when they moved into Florida. And he would entertain himself in between races with the claw machines. And when you were a baby, I would get boxes, just huge boxes of all of these stuffed animal things that Uncle Bob had won in the claw machines and sent to you. And and the funny thing is it's got to be some genetic component because I remember when we went uh to Busch Gardens when we were in Williamsburg and we were getting ready to leave there, and you wanted the Griffin
Oh yeah.
uh, stuffed thing, and you managed to get not only one Griffin, but two Griffins in one grab out of the
Mhm.
claw machine so that you had one and one for your sister. It was
Mhm.
quite remarkable.
I should probably be, there might be something genetic. I should probably be hunting more. But I didn't get to see Uncle Bob too much. I think I only met him in person like a couple times, but
A couple of
just had
times,
this,
yeah, because they moved to Florida when you were
yeah.
real little.
But just the sense of like abundance and like him being like the master of his own destiny. And just
Yeah.
like, I don't know, like growing up, like disability was never like a game ending thing. Like I
Oh,
was
no,
definitely
absolutely
surrounded by
not.
people of all different ability levels and it was just never stigmatized at all. And there were a lot of like deeply adaptive people. So like I think that really impacted my perception of like your fate in life and like luck and what you do with it. And I think that the claw machine was like a great example of that because I had this pouring of just abundance and you only let me keep like a couple. You're like, dude, there's no way. There's no, because we just get them by the trash bag. They're just huge. And you're like, you can pick your favorite one. We're not keeping 20. And I'm like, what do you mean? You can't tempt me in this way. Yeah. I know I wasn't super into stuffies though. So I'm sure it wasn't as bad as other things.
But
I
he
liked
sure got
rocks
a
a lot.
kick out of being able to send them to you.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a certain flavor of abundance. Like it was the fun abundance. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Oh, he was really cool. So I didn't get to illustrate the claw machine, but now everybody knows that's the story that's actually in this. It just didn't fit on the page super good. But just the random machine is the spirit, I think, of the Wheel of Fortune for a child from their perspective. This one is like just a pretty straight poured over, but I think it's really important. I don't know if this is significant to you as a Michigan person, but when I was illustrating this, I really wanted to try to portray Our Lady of Justice, Jumana K. Ruse, who's the lawyer lady on all the billboards, who usually has some really fashionable like shade of lipstick and looks very like disappointed in you and stuff. Well, those billboards, my old roommate was going to law school, and like every time we drive by one of those, it was like, man, someday I'm gonna be like her. I'm gonna have a billboard, and that was just like the epitome of like having arrived. Is like having one of those billboards and being the paragon of justice of the "Have you been injured?" billboard. I don't know. So that's I don't know if I drew her very good, but that's what's in here. And I think that's like most of my ideas of justice as a kid were really cartoonish. Just really, because I was kind of judgy. I don't know. I was a goody two shoes. So I was very by the book and I was kind of a snitch, you know. You know.
You were accustomed to having women lay down the law because
Yeah.
your dad was traveling for work so much, and so yeah, Lady Justice makes a heck of a lot of sense.
hmm Yeah, I tried to kind of pull it all together. In my version, I wanted her to have the sword like available, but laying down and like choosing the torch instead, like choosing to try to set a good example rather than be punishing. But like, don't mess with her though, because it's like right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like the original version, like her hair super sucks, and the expression, yeah, is just not there. On a lot of mine, I think because of the holographic style, like they're not gonna have very good expressions. And Josh and I agreed, like the eyes will just kind of be filled in, so you can kind of like project your own expression onto them, just like as a point of necessity for the art style. But if I could do it differently with a different medium, I would. But for the holographic, you're a little limited with like what the lines are going to be able to do. So she looks a little, vague and starey, just like the original, but the spirit's there. But the color scheme is absolutely out. I'm sure you remember when I was a kid, everything had to be pink or purple or blue.
Blue, yeah.
Yep. That was the law. And yeah, and now my favorite color is orange. It's really strange how things flip.
Yeah.
I went through my blue phase in middle school though. Every
Oh, absolutely.
oh.
Oh, yeah. 2.5 years you didn't wear anything but.
But this one we're gonna see these kind of come as a set, the 12 and the 13. 'Cause we had a lot of butterfly experiences. Um you coordinated a lot. You get us the kits, the egg kits for
Uh-huh.
hatching them, and we had the mesh housing for them, and we actually got to see like the whole life cycle and stuff, which was pretty awesome.
Yeah, the extension offered different things. We'd go to the uh, ladybug launch and
hmm
all of the butterfly events and the pollinator gardens, and I love the imagery of the monarch as the hanged man. It I'd never thought about that concept before, but they have to die in order to live again, and
hmm
very interesting.
The butterfly is a pretty common motif for like oracle cards, as far as like, being reduced to goo and then rebuilding yourself and flying and all that kind of stuff.
Uh-huh.
So I thought it was pretty appropriate here. But yeah, also just like as a child, there's particular. I think I experienced this way more with cicadas because they were around more, but we had the butterflies too. But just the whole transformation, I loved the cicadas and just like the colors when they were like curing and like hardening up or whatever.
Mhm.
Uh, yeah, I mean, because we had a few severe hatches out of cicadas, and because we had so many like trees and stuff in the backyard, like they'd just be coated. And then at the new house, we would if there was a huge hatch out, they'd be so many of them you could just kind of scoop them up, and we'd use them as fish bait and stuff, and throw them in the pond, which was they were just so plentiful. You just crunch them underfoot. It was crazy. We had a frog incident too. I don't remember which year that was, but that really left an impression on me because I loved frogs. I loved frogs and toads so much. Do you remember I would go frog patrol before Dad mowed the lawn to try to make sure none
Uh-huh.
of them got
Oh,
eviscerated?
yeah, that was the old house. That we would have thousands of them.
Yeah,
Little baby frogs, little baby toads.
so many
It was
times.
a very wet neighborhood. One of the reasons
hmm
we moved out. But anyway, yeah, there would be thousands of them, and you would just collect them and play with them. And I
hmm
always appreciated that, shooing them off before I ran the mower or the weed
Yeah.
whacker.
We didn't always win that, and then God, there were
No.
tears. There was a yeah, and then when there was that hatch out with the thousands and thousands and like they were just in the streets and stuff and just getting run, I was devastated. I thought the world was coming to an end. I was a weird mix of like really empathetic and then sometimes really callous. I kind of had the propensity for both,
Hmm.
but very soft spot for the transformational animals because frogs go through a cycle too of
Sure
sort.
they do.
So the duality between the hanged man phase and the death phase, I wanted to show here in the iconic characters, which I was also obsessed with. Uh,
Mothra.
yeah, there was a lot of Godzilla going on.
A
I don't know
lot.
who started it. How did Godzilla start being my bag?
Oh, from the time you were a toddler. Actually, when Grandpa was still alive, so you were very small, and he got you little Godzilla eggs and Godzilla toys and things.
Hmm.
Yeah, you just were attracted to them.
Yeah, like hardcore. I don't know what it was. All the movies, all they were just totally alongside all the other like pony stuff. It was just totally compatible. And Godzilla was part of my adaptation to my dad's hobby of model trains, which I wasn't particularly fond of in of themselves. I like chilling with him and doing stuff with him, and I certainly love models, but trains in particular, I've just never had an affinity for. So my solution was to bring the Godzilla stuff on the train set with mixed results.
Are those the tiny girls in the foreground?
Yeah. Yes. Yes, those are the tiny girls. They have in the original card there's the innocent children and everybody kind of being potentially trampled, so I put them kind of just out of harm's way as sort of a parallel for the innocent children. Yeah, I learned the song. Man, I was into it. They had to be really frustrated.
And
Just
is that a mushroom cloud in the background?
yes. Yes, very important. Yeah, I was very concerned with nuclear stuff. From like a pretty young age. I had like a weird fixation and awareness of it. And when I was like a little bit older, I was kind of obsessed with Oppenheimer and stuff. It was weird. I don't know where that all comes from. I can't explain that bit.
That's a very interesting card.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, I don't know. I had strong feelings about it. It was weird. It would be, yeah, magical girls one minute and then mushroom clouds the next. It was kind of both. But I've always really liked the death card. It's kind of the most maligned card in the deck because endings are painful, but also ultimately they can be necessary. And in order for new birth to happen, you have to have some endings. So I was always really like into the Mothra character because she's so sacrificial. She's like the ultimate sacrificing mom. She always manages to go stash an egg somewhere just before the final battle. And it's like, oh, great, we're gonna have, it's gonna continue. The cycle doesn't end. But, every time she ends up getting totally beat up and, does something in the final battle to make sure, humanity can go on, even though they're, the source of the radiation and stuff. And it was just like so heartbreaking. I don't know. I was really sensitive to that as a kid. This one aesthetically, I think, is closer to like the prairie thing, and therefore, like your tile stuff. That definitely left
Uh-huh.
an impression as a kid. Yeah, again with the deer people. We just like deer. Deer
We
people.
like deer.
Yeah. Yeah, I was like, this is mostly based on like the deer ladies from Warcraft who are wrongfully called dryads. Of course, dryads are like tree people, not deer people, but I love it anyway. And they're very associated with nature regulation, so it goes with the temperance archetype. And I just wanted to show in this card just way more landscape and way more dynamic,
Uh-huh.
like water movement and all of that.
Yeah,
In
the waterfall is much more interesting than dipping your foot in the water in the original.
hmm With the weird mangled toes. Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
But I like the irises. I went with a different coloration in this and kind of just different vibe. But I like those kind of flowers. I like reeds a lot and just cattails and that whole the scenery. Very Michigan, I know, but I like the waterways and just that whole mood. I guess it's just not like that for everybody, or it's not. It's kind of unique.
No, we're pretty spoiled with the amount of water that we have available to us.
Hmm. Yeah, so this one, other fun, controversial card. This is actually the Capricorn Trump card, so a lot of negative association, but kind of means something different for us, I guess. The devil is supposed to represent like what binds you, like what your habits are, like what your excuses are, like what holds you back, and like being able to become aware of it and then liberate yourself. So in my card, it's more of the Minotaur character, and he's able to break the chains and uh make his own choices and stuff. And Minotaurs are a big might and magic thing. Some of me and my dad's favorite characters were the Minotaurs. They were the first clan you ally with, and so I have strong feels about them. They were my buddies. Kind of different meaning, I guess, than like the mythological Minotaur. That kind of goes off in a different direction.
Correction.
But RPG Minotaurs, often very thoughtful uh individuals, I guess.
You talked about it, but not to excess. I mean,
Okay.
just that you had so many different interests and you'd bounce from one thing to another, but never so much so on one topic that it got to be, a roll your eyes kind of
Oh,
thing.
good. Well, that's comforting.
That's hardly a glowing endorsement, but you know.
Yeah, I did have my phases for sure though. But that was a pretty like any of the pretty much any of the fantasy movies, I was I was down for all of them. Oh, also I guess I could say like that is like kind of like the legend Tim Curry Red Devil guy
Uh-huh.
definitely.
Yeah.
I loved practical effects stuff and I loved Jim Henson and just like any of that kind of golden age of fantasy that was like very applied. I really liked. This one, probably not as I did have a treehouse, but like this symbol kind of came to me a bit later. Um, because I know for like a lot of other people, the treehouse was kind of like their community center, or like the meetup place of the kids. I
Uh-huh.
didn't really have it as much because my meetups were pretty regimented. But I like the symbol of the treehouse from like a child's perspective being their kind of like sanctuary away, and
Mhm.
like the place that they could get away from the parents and kind of be away from scrutiny. I think that was a little more of an 80s thing than a 90s kid thing, but I wanted to use that here in place of the tower because the tower was actually the first card I illustrated when I was coming up with the concept of this deck, and it was just kind of like a prettier stylized one. And then it was really funny going back and looking at the original version versus the final and being like, oh yeah, this deck went in a completely different direction than I
Right.
originally set out for. But tower is also one of the bad cards in the deck, I guess, because it means a cycle coming to an ending or needing to admit when things are becoming kind of problematic or toxic and sometimes needing a total rework and the discomfort of change. Did you have a treehouse as a kid or like a meeting place?
Um, no. We didn't have a tree house, just, trees and
Mhm.
spent plenty of time in them. But it was just uh Patty and myself and we were outside. We didn't have anybody around us, so there was nobody really to get away from.
Hmm.
Yeah, we just the woods were our sanctuary.
So I guess that's very different. Yeah, because I mean, I had my hideouts like at school because I was bullied pretty severely. So like I would hide in the art room where I had mostly middle school was pretty bad, but elementary was pretty bad too. But you actually stepped in on that with the Quiet Zone project and creating that wooded kind of calm space in between because our playground was like totally mixed grades K through 5 or whatever
Hmm.
originally, and you were actually like an involved parent and gave a shit and stuff. So you were like, yeah, probably we shouldn't have this all mixed up and all the
Well,
older
we
kids wailing on everybody. So there needs to be a neutral area. And you planted a bunch of stuff and got the budget for the shrubs and stuff.
well, when they put the auditorium on the school, that they had to remove most of the existing playground, and so I was on the committee to design a new playground. So I didn't want to just have playground equipment plunked down someplace and then the kids run amok. So The idea was to divide it up into different usage areas, and not all kids want to climb and run and scream and go crazy. So I wanted to have an outdoor classroom area because at that time the school wasn't air conditioned and we
Hmm.
had shade from some existing ash trees. And so I created an outdoor quiet zone that was kind of walled off from the rest of the playground by plant material so that kids could sit and cool off and read or just talk and have more passive kinds of recess activity.
Yeah, it was really nice. You're so thoughtful and stuff, man. You put so much into all these designs. I really appreciate that about you. It was a very nice thought. I think it didn't end up getting maintained the way it should have, but like
No,
the
the
whole
kids kind of
concept.
tore through it. Well, and the emerald ash borers took care of the shade. So, uh,
Hmm.
yeah, that was difficult, but it was it was an idea that worked well for a while. And then, as with maintaining all public areas, um, there has to be a level of commitment from all parties involved. And
Yeah. Well, this I think fits that concept as far as like having some place to go, and when that does get uprooted or disrupted, you have to figure out how to rebuild and
Mhm.
what lessons to carry forward. So that's the spirit of the tower card, I think. More blurring. This one probably won't be as relatable. It wasn't very relatable to me either because I didn't really play the Zelda games very much, but this was like the one impression I guess I got was like the Great Fairies Fountain as being this place of like inspiration and recharge, but I didn't have the grit and dedication for like really difficult video games unless it was like you can think your way through the problem. If it was like push the buttons in the right order, yeah, forget it. I was not that kind of competitive gamer.
No,
But the fairy was cool. I like fairies in general. I think that's pretty universal. 90s little girl. Fairies are cool. But yeah, this is not the most relatable tarot card by default anyway. Like what is even
what is the background of the star card? What does it symbolize?
basically the seven stars or whatever, those smaller stars are kind of like seven as a fairy kind of number, and then, the focal star. The background, I'm not really sure. It's got some kind of ibis bird, so I don't know if that's like a reference,
Yeah,
a phoenix or a Bennu bird kind of thing, like a rebirth thing. But the star is supposed to mostly be associated with like the Aquarian force of like inspiration and like freshness. Um, and it shows her pouring water out onto the ground and then it's trickling its way into the main tributary as it's getting filtered, I guess. So I kind of showed that just through more aeration or more just like the layers of fountain having kind of a purifying effect and like the bathing being more of the emphasis because I feel like in the card she's supposed to be more bathing.
rather than standing on the
Yeah, it's
water.
weird what she's doing with all that and that she's just like kneeling awkwardly. It's just one of the most awkward cards. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, it's
And it's
not
carrying over
giving
like
me
the
a whole lot
judgment.
of impression.
Yeah, from the temperance, it's just like, so what's the difference between the temperance and the star? And so the kind of the takeaway I had is they're both, have some water in some way, but also these airy connotations. So that's why I brought the fairies in to kind of represent wishes and stars
Uh-huh.
um and then I've got the Lysianthus flowers, the florist that I worked at that was the owner's favorite. So
Oh, I love Lucianthus.
yeah, they're
Buds are
very
so
cool.
beautiful.
I don't think I drew them super convincingly, but
But
that's
you
the
did
vibe it
get
was
the
supposed to
buds
be.
on there, so
That was the idea anyway, fountains and this one's fun. I'm pleased with the lunatic frog concept. Of course,
uh-huh.
we didn't have the Princess and the Frog movie at that time, but I do really like that one as it came out later. I replaced the dogs, the weird red-eyed howling angry dogs. I replaced them with the dancing frogs to be a little more whimsical.
Uh-huh.
And the moon is supposed to be about, the regular watery intuition stuff, but also like secrets or like hidden talents or being in tune with the cycles of the moon, of course, and like
Uh-huh.
kind of lowered inhibitions and personal exploration and things like that. So I thought the dancing frogs was kind of all of those things we talked about before with like butterflies and transformation, the frogs do too. So they're going through their personal evolution, but tearing it up. And then instead of the weird lobster thing that's going on in the
You got the
original card, I
cricket.
have the cricket or the firefly kind of archetype with the little bug on the lily pad.
Uh-huh. Weren't there
Mm.
frogs in the book I used to read you, the summertime song?
Oh yeah. I haven't thought about that one for a long time. Yeah, I think like frogs and music and like dancing, like that whole, because they're very musical creatures themselves. Of course, they croak and stuff. And we have, as we talked about, we live in like a really wet place. So spring peepers are like pretty much deafening. They're very powerful in their calls. So like frogs are kind of a musical animal. But I do like what they did with I don't think you've seen the Disney Princess and the Frog. I don't usually recommend Disney movies to, grown ass people, but I would that one because it's in New Orleans. And we
Oh,
went to New
really?
Orleans. And that left definitely a huge impression on me as a child. New Orleans was a very magical place.
Yeah.
I just the food and the culture and just the vibe. Because it kind of jives, I think, with Detroit. Like it's got similar values in some ways, and it just was such a cool place to be. And that's where I got my first job.
Or you asked for your first
No,
job.
I was awarded that job. He said to show up.
Do you want me to tell the story?
Yes, that's pretty.
Okay. Let's see. Callie was about 5.5, not quite 6, traveling to New Orleans. She was always fascinated by Venetian masks and, the idea of Mardi Gras, Carnival, whatever. I don't know where she got that
But
from.
I don't like
But
clowns. I don't know. It doesn't.
no,
Yeah, I don't
no,
know.
no, no clowns. Anyway, so we're going through the French Quarter, and we go into a mask store shop, and she just marches up to the counter and asks if she can have a job at the store, that she really likes the mask and she knows that she would do a good job.
And he was so
He was
good about
so
it.
nice.
Played right along. Just like, yep,
Everybody
when can you
was
start?
so nice. And here, it was you, and like I said, at your age, and then your sister was in an infant carrier. So,
Hmm.
but everybody we came in contact with was just so very wonderful to us.
Yeah.
Made it a special trip.
Speaking of babies, so there's
Yeah.
not much going on with this one other than it's a baby. I think the original card's a little strange. Um, it's supposed to just be like optimism and new beginnings and
Uh-huh.
you know, the freshness of youth and the sunrise and kind of the things that talked about in the Fool kind of come up again with the sun, but it's just like positivity and like, confidence and all of those things. So obviously it had to be a unicorn Pegasus situation because I'm gonna get that in there however I can.
Where
This
you
would be
can.
um but yeah, otherwise it's a pretty straightforward port. There is a character in Sailor Moon that's the Pegasus that's sort of a protector of children and, watching over their dreams and stuff. So I tried to, I guess, bring in more of like that hopes and dreams optimism, which I don't
Uh-huh.
know if it came through super strong in the original card.
Well, that's what I've been, just thinking about the whole time going through the cards that we have thus far. The originals are just so th- they're stern, they're judgmental, they're
And they're
oppressive. And
vague.
and you're in
Yeah.
your version, your
Sweeping.
illustrations, even when you're conveying a very serious uh aspect of life, they're there's an optimism, there's an
Hmm.
energy in them. And it kind of relates back to talking about, family experiences and things like that, when we were talking about, Uncle Bob and his challenges and his conquering of those challenges. Um, our families dealt with a lot of adversity, but they lived in hope. And what I'm
Mhm.
seeing in your illustrations that there's an optimism and an energy that is very hopeful in them.
I hope so. I think I definitely was pretty hopeful as a child. I was pretty idealistic. But yeah, you're totally right. Like there's a lot of the idealism that just gets stern in kind of the originals. This card is just such an obvious example of that, the judgment, because it's kind of I think the original reference was kind of like the biblical flood, and like here we have naked people like rising up out of coffins. It's very heavy.
Yeah.
Um, and I wouldn't say mine is super light, but I kind of incorporated a little more of that Native American mythology, which I was actually kind of exposed to as a kid, and I was fortunate. Um, I got to take Native American Civ in high school and just really be immersed. Um, and that all kind of made an impression on me, like being exposed to like stories of white buffalo woman as a kid. Um, it I think I had a pretty good education in that regard to be like made aware of indigenous cultures and stuff. And I do really love the Thunderbird concept as kind of their judge rather than the stern angry angel thing. I mean, he's still kind of stern, but he's this natural force of the storm. And so in my version, I wanted to show like a long shipwrecked boat that's just obliterated in a storm, and there's just like reminders of it along the coast and how like you have to run a tight ship. You have to be careful because storms are real, and like you can be pretty chill in life, but you also have to have a certain reverence and preparedness. This is one of my favorite cards.
Mhm.
Last of the major arcana brings the hero's journey full cycle. The world is about like having the whole world open up to you again before starting in another cycle with the fool and taking a leap of faith. But this one is based on the silver acorns of antiquity that get tossed into the limpid pool of time, and these are the golden travel trees. um, and I love the trees in Princess Guinevere being like a vehicle or being like a portal to the
Mm.
world, or like being how you travel throughout the world. And of course, like the Druidic or Nordic world tree is also kind of that connection or that vehicle of the Axis Mundi. So, what do you think? Does this bring it full circle?
Oh, yes, very much so. Oak is the basis of life,
Hmm.
not just for us, but as research has shown that oak is what feeds the entire food web.
Hmm.
It keeps us all going.